My guest today is Dr. George Catlin, who is a professor of psychology at Carthage College. Dr. Catlin was raised in the Christian faith and has since studied New Age thought for many years. George and I have known each other for years. Welcome to the show, George. I'm glad you could make it.
Thank you, Dick. It's a pleasure to be here.
George, you recently wrote a wonderful article that was published called Christianity and the New Age. And the New Age, the idea of New Age thought and New Age religions and so on is, we're hearing more and more about that. Where did this New Age come from, this New Age thought, and why now?
Well, New Age thought is just like every other spiritual impulse which has come to humanity, in that it springs out of those teachings which had been given prior to it. If we think back historically, it's obvious that the oldest religions are perhaps Hinduism in the East and Judaism in the West. Mm-hmm. And from both of those, we see further teachings were given by further enlightened beings who came and, in a sense, updated the teachings, brought a new sense of what humanity really is to humanity of that time. Mm-hmm. In the East, we know that as Buddhism. Buddha, of course, came in about 500 BC. And in the West, of course, Christ came and started the whole Christian dispensation, coming out of the Jewish dispensation which preceded it. In the exact same way, New Age thought comes out of perhaps Hinduism, Buddhism, into the New Age, and in the West, Judaism, Christianity, and then into the New Age. As many people say, we're at kind of the turn of a time. People who believe in astrology talk about a new age dawning, the Aquarian age we talk some about. But regardless of what one may think about astrology, it's very clear that we've run through a 2,000-year cycle, certainly with Christianity.
Yes.
And humanity has evolved tremendously in the past 2,000 years. And so we're ready today for a new way of understanding ourselves. We're ready for a next step into our actual divinity.
Now, George, who are the major proponents of New Age thought? Who are the people that are releasing these teachings, these ideas?
The actual origin of the New Age thought comes from a group of what I would call fully enlightened human beings who have lived behind the scenes of Earth evolution for thousands and thousands of years. But the people who we know outwardly, and especially the people who we know in the West, begin with Madame Blavatsky, an indomitable Russian woman who in 1875 released to the West the first real expression of what would be the heart of New Age thought. Blavatsky lived throughout Europe, but spent 2 different trips to India. And then she came back and wrote these fantastic treatises, the most famous one being The Secret Doctrine.
The Secret Doctrine, right.
Absolutely. Following Blavatsky, as you may know, a second woman, this time a British woman, Alice Bailey, released a whole other set of teachings which came from the exact same source, though. And Bailey's teachings, to my eye, are just kind of a further clarification and elaboration of what Blavatsky brought. And then following Bailey, now recently, since 1975, a British artist, Benjamin Creme, has been giving what seems to me to be a further clarification of Bailey's teachings.
Okay. Now, as I, like you, was raised in the Christian tradition as well, and there are the basis of the Christian tradition, the Christian faith, seems to be love. Love your neighbor as yourself, love God,
yes.
And the fact that humanity is one, that the brotherhood of humanity, I guess you could say. Yet we see so much separation in the Christian church. I think you mentioned in your article something like by one report there were 22,000 different denominations or sects of divisions of Christianity, and so there's this separateness. And you talk in your article about religious totalitarianism. Could you tell us what that is and why we should be on guard against religious totalitarianism?
Yeah, it's a lot of big words, religious totalitarianism, yes. But I think at the heart of it is a very simple concept which has to do with humanity's current ability to understand itself. And humanity as a whole suffers from something that I think many of us individually suffer from, which is the deep belief that whatever we believe is right. And not only right, but the only truth. And within Christianity, we can see that Christianity, as you rightly point out, seems to have fundamentally a notion of love and loving one's neighbor as oneself at its very core. Still, it's fragmented into all these 22,000 different denominations, all who see it slightly differently, sadly, all of whom believe that their way of seeing it is the right and true way of seeing it. And of course, those are just the divisions within Christianity, but then we have the divisions between the world's major religions. And there again, we see the exact same problem. Our way of understanding humanity and divinity is right,
it's the only
and the
one.
Hindus and the Buddhists or whoever are wrong.
Yes.
And of course, the Buddhists and the Hindus turn it around the exact same way and say, well, you know, we understand things correctly, and it's these Christians and Jews who are wrong. Right, and obviously, it seems to me that modern humanity can understand, well, truth is a many-faceted thing, and we have a tremendous problem when any one group says, not only do we have the truth, but we have the whole truth and everyone else is wrong. And the challenge before humanity seems to me to be very obviously to understand that all of these are pieces of the truth, and there must be some way that these pieces fit together to form a larger whole.
Now, it seems to me that the same thing is happening with New Age thought, that there are just groups with all different kinds of different versions of the original teachings that you were talking about, Blavatsky and Bailey, and that those schisms are growing up there too. Do you see it that way?
Oh, absolutely. And the funny thing about New Age thought is that it hasn't been canonized in any sense yet. And most people who consider themselves New Age thinkers, many of them haven't read Blavatsky or Bailey or Krem. They don't have the faintest idea where the ideas that they feel so close to are actually coming from. And in one sense, that's fine, because the kind of expression of divinity which I think we're looking for at this time is a divinity which springs from the hearts of many individuals, not a bunch of people who have necessarily read and memorized a particular creed.
Okay.
On the other hand, there has to be a core to all of this. It can't just be everybody's sense of maybe what's true. There has to be some overlap. We talk about essential Christianity being that place where all these thousands of sects overlap and say, yeah, well, this, though we may differ, this is essential Christianity. I think as time passes, we'll identify what we might call essential New Age thought, which would be the place where all these different groups, however they may be understanding themselves and their relationship to divinity, would say, oh yes, we agree on this. This is fundamental to our perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk for a minute then about some of the similarities and differences between Christianity, Christian thought, Christian ideas, typical traditional Christian ideas, and New Age thought and New Age ideas in different areas that you talk about in your article. For example, one of them would be the idea of justice, the concept of justice. There's a little bit different view there. I think probably the strongest representation of justice on the Christian side would be presented in the Christian Old Testament portion of the Bible, where there are all the laws. The book of Deuteronomy is the last book of Moses, nothing but laws, for example. And that would be, wouldn't you say, an expression of the justice of the Christian religion?
Absolutely. And that justice side of Christianity, as opposed to the love side of Christianity, seems to be what the Roman Church, as opposed to the Greek and Eastern churches, have integrated most fully.
I see.
And so those of us who have grown up, as it were, in the shadow or in the light of the Roman Church, have experienced a real sense of don't step out of line. And certainly the Ten Commandments say this, all these thou shalt nots. And if you do step out of line, there's kind of a sense that something terrible is going to happen to you. And some people experience that as everlasting hell, and other people think of it as just maybe never getting to heaven, or that you become a sinful person is the other thing that's very central to this aspect of Christianity. And this idea that one lives with a self-concept of, I am fundamentally bad, because either of particular deeds that I've done, or to my mind, a bigger problem is I'm fundamentally bad just by birth, original sin.
Yes.
By nature of being a human being, I've already gone wrong. And then one's left with the problem of how to redeem myself because I am so terrible inherently.